Successful or significant? Successful in the world or significant for the world that is to come? Well, let's see. The year's about 1940, and Philip, he's a UK boy, United Kingdom. He is the only child, and he will tell you that his family owned a bakery. It was a break-even at best. I mean, they did okay. They made ends meet, but you're only going so far so fast. But if you were to ask Philip, man, tell me what your life was like. He would say, man, grammar school, high school, tumultuous. He said, man, it was a shipwreck. He said, well, how? And the reporter that's talking to him said, well, how could that be? He said, man, you don't understand. I'm the quintessential introvert. He said, wait a minute, Philip, you're an introvert? He said, oh, to a fault. I can't stand around crowds. I can't be around people. My anxiety goes off the charts. He said, I get nervous. I break out in sweats. He said, man, I take medicine. He said, as popular as you are in the world, he said, people would have no idea. He said, that's how it is today. It was even worse in grammar school and high school. He said, I didn't do anything. When it was time to graduate, he said, man, all I knew to do was to be a baker. And then by chance, I meet Richard Burton. And he says, then the whole world changed. I told my parents, I want to be an actor. And I remember somewhat like what they were telling me. He said, paraphrasing, he said, you can be successful or not in the world, but will you be significant in the world to come? He said, so I started getting bit parts in plays, thinking, man, I just don't want to be a baker. So he said, my first movie was Death Comes to Me. Huge hit, I can see that. It's kind of like where this homily is going. Death comes to me. And so as a result of it, he goes from Death Comes to Me, he goes to Give Me a Cigarette, just as popular as the first one. And then he gets his big break, A Bridge Too Far. He said, man, then the world opens up. He said, next thing you know, I'm in Zorro. He says, I get another break in the action. I do Legends of the Fall. I get Meet Joe Black. I was in that one. I didn't memorize 100 of these things, right? You know that, right? Okay. And then subsequently, man, he plays Pope Benedict in The Two Popes. He plays Pope Benedict in The Two Popes. He's Hannibal Lecter. Wow, Lord. Hannibal Lecter? Silence of the Lambs, that's right. That's right. Philip Anthony Hopkins, right? What's amazing is they interviewed him, right, and talking to him, the same interviewer, and they were talking to him about, well, what do you do for vacation if you... He said, what do you do? He said, I get in my car and I drive from one coast to the other. I stop every so often in a town, and I like meeting people, but only briefly, so I can get in my car and I can leave. He said, but when they come to recognize me, I got to leave because I can't take it. He said, but they usually don't recognize me as much, but today it's gotten harder. And he said, so would you sit down and have lunch with me? And he said, well, I would, but, it's just me and you. He said, well, if you would have lunch with me, he said, would you have lunch with Hannibal Lecter? And he said, no, because it depends on what he's eating, right? True story. My brother and sister in Christ, you know what turns Anthony Hopkins to make him who he is? AA. He said, man, I was an atheist and a drunk. I go to my first AA meeting, and the first there, if you'd ever realized that half of the steps in the AA meeting have to do with God. He said, that's when the world became significant. That I may be successful in the world, but I need to start doing things in the world that are significant for the world to come. That is exactly where that gospel is. The good Lord is talking and telling the Pharisees, yeah, you're successful in the world, but what I'm about to do is significant because it's going to change this man and hopefully the people that listen to him so that they will be prepared for the world to come. Now stop. You're first century Jews. You need to know these things. My brother and sister in Christ, remember this. As a blind person, he's been blind for almost 30 years of his life that we know of. When the good Lord spits into the ground, you're a Jew. You know that in the book of Genesis, written by Moses,